That night felt like something out of a nightmare. The man I had loved for 8 years stood in front of a crowd of our friends and colleagues, smiling proudly, as if he hadn't just ripped my heart apart. When Ethan announced that he was in love with someone else, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled, because deep down I already knew, and I had been waiting for this moment. For months, things had been different. Ethan had grown colder, always busy, always too tired. The way he avoided my eyes at dinner told me more than his words ever could. I tried to convince myself that marriage went through rough patches, that maybe he was just stressed from work. But the truth was sitting right in front of me every night. I just didn't want to see it. He started spending late nights at the office, claiming his boss needed him for extra projects. I believed him at first. Ethan had always been ambitious, and I had supported him through everything. But then came the perfume on his shirt, the sudden new cologne, and the way he smiled at his phone. Every instinct inside me screamed that something was wrong. I remember one night when he came home late past midnight. His tie was gone, and he smelled like wine. When I asked where he'd been, he said there was a team dinner. But his voice cracked just slightly, the kind of crack that happens when someone tries too hard to sound calm. I didn't argue. I just nodded and watched him walk past me, pretending everything was fine. That night, I sat alone in our living room, staring at our wedding photo. The laughter, the promises, the love, it all felt so far away. I wanted to cry, but instead, I made a decision. If he was hiding something, I would find out. I wasn't going to fall apart quietly while he lived a lie. So, I started paying attention. Every lie he told became a clue. I noticed when he started dressing better for work, when he got nervous every time his phone buzzed, when he changed his passwords without reason. He thought I was too naive to notice. He was wrong. During the day, I played my part as the supportive wife. But inside, I was building strength piece by piece. I knew that when the truth came out, I wanted to be ready, not to beg, not to cry, but to stand tall. The night of the party, I had already seen enough to know what he would do. I felt it in my gut that something big was coming. I could see it in his eyes, the excitement of a man who thought he had control. He had no idea that I was holding the real power. When he finally stood up to make that announcement, I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt calm, almost peaceful, because what he didn't know was that his betrayal had already written his own ending, and I was about to let him read it. It started with the little things, the kind of details most people would overlook. Ethan began taking calls late at night, stepping out of the room and lowering his voice so I couldn't hear. When I asked who it was, he'd smile and say, "Just work, Maddie. Go back to sleep." At first, I believed him. He had always been dedicated to his job, and I wanted to trust him. But something about the way he said it didn't feel right. Then came the texts. He became protective of his phone, setting it face down on the table, turning off notifications, even taking it into the shower. Once, when it buzzed, I caught a glimpse of the name Valerie. He said she was his new boss, a woman known for being strict but professional. I didn't think much of it until he started mentioning her more often. How talented she was, how she understood him, how she made work more exciting. The way his eyes lit up when he spoke about her made my stomach twist. Soon, Valerie's name became a regular part of our conversations. He'd bring her up over dinner, talking about her ideas, her leadership, her so-called vision. It wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, something he couldn't hide. I knew that tone in his voice. I'd heard it years ago when he first fell in love with me. I didn't want to accuse him without proof, so I stayed quiet. Instead of fighting, I watched. I started paying attention to every small change, the extra hours, the new clothes, the sudden need for privacy. He began staying out later, claiming he had client dinners or team meetings. I could tell he was lying, but I needed to be sure before I acted. So I wrote things down. Dates, times, excuses, everything. I kept a small notebook hidden in my drawer, where I listed each strange behavior. Monday, came home late, said meeting ran over. Tuesday, perfume smell on his jacket. Friday, didn't answer calls for 2 hours. The more I wrote, the more obvious the pattern became. One evening, he came home unusually cheerful. He hugged me, brought flowers, and said Valerie had complimented his presentation. I smiled back, but inside I was crumbling. He didn't realize that every sweet word, every fake gesture only made his betrayal clearer. I wasn't imagining things. He was slipping away piece by piece. At night, when he fell asleep, I'd lie beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly our marriage had stopped being real. There was still love in my heart, but it was buried under layers of doubt and hurt. I knew I had to be patient. If Ethan was hiding something, the truth would show itself soon. People like him always get comfortable in their lies. And when they do, that's when they make mistakes. I just had to wait, and when the time came, I would be ready. That evening, Ethan rushed out of the house, saying he had an emergency meeting with a client. He didn't even finish his dinner, just grabbed his keys and left in a hurry. I watched him go, something inside me whispering that this wasn't about work. I tried to distract myself by cleaning up, but my mind kept spinning. I couldn't stop thinking about the late-night calls, the perfume, and Valerie's name that kept showing up in our conversations. About 20 minutes later, I walked past the living room and noticed something on the couch. It was Ethan's phone. He never left without it, never. My heart started racing. For a moment, I just stared at it, my hands frozen. I knew I shouldn't go through it. I knew it would hurt. But I also knew this might be the only chance to find out the truth. I sat down slowly and picked it up. My hands were trembling as I unlocked it. He had changed his password recently, but he must have been in such a rush that he forgot to lock it this time. I opened his messages and saw a string of texts from Valerie. My breath caught when I read the most recent one. "Can't wait for you to finally tell her, babe." The words hit me like a punch. My chest felt tight, and my eyes started to sting. I read it again, hoping I had misunderstood. But it was there, plain as day, the confirmation of everything I had feared. My husband wasn't just having an affair, he was planning to replace me. I scrolled up, each message worse than the last. There were pictures of them together at restaurants, jokes about me being clueless, and messages filled with affection. They had even talked about taking a trip together, once things were settled. I felt sick to my stomach. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My whole world felt like it was collapsing right there in my hands. But then something inside me changed. The sadness didn't last long. It hardened into anger, into strength. I wiped my tears and stared at his phone, realizing that crying wouldn't fix anything. I took a deep breath, took photos of the messages with my own phone, and placed his back exactly where I found it. No one would ever know I had seen them. I sat there in silence, my mind racing but my face calm. That night, when he came home hours later, I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch TV. He kissed me on the forehead, told me the meeting went great, and smiled like nothing had happened. I smiled back, but inside, I was no longer the same woman. Something had shifted. The pain had turned into a plan. I wasn't going to confront him, not yet. I was going to wait for the right moment, and when it came, he'd realize he had betrayed the wrong woman. After reading those messages, I knew I couldn't just accuse Ethan without proof. He would deny everything, twist my words, and make me look like the crazy one. That was his style, calm, confident, and always in control. But this time, I wasn't going to let him win. I needed something solid, something he couldn't talk his way out of. For a few nights, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying those words from Valerie in my mind. "Can't wait for you to finally tell her, babe." It made my stomach turn every time. But instead of breaking down, I started thinking carefully. I wanted to know exactly what they were saying when I wasn't around. That's when an idea came to me. Ethan had a habit of taking work calls in his car. He thought the car was his private space, a place where no one could hear him. I decided that would be the perfect spot to uncover the truth. I went online, found a small voice recorder, and ordered it. When it arrived, it was so tiny it could easily be hidden under the car seat without being noticed. One morning, before Ethan left for work, I told him I needed to grab something from the car. While he was making coffee, I quickly slid the recorder under the passenger seat, turned it on, and walked back inside like nothing had happened. My heart was racing the entire time, but I forced myself to act normal. The next few days felt endless. Every time he drove off, I wondered what I might hear later. When he got home, I'd quietly sneak the recorder out, charge it, and listen with my headphones. At first, it was just boring conversations, phone calls, music, traffic noise. But on the third day, I finally got what I was waiting for. It started with laughter. Then I heard Valerie's voice, clear as day. "She still has no idea, does she?" she said, giggling. Ethan laughed too, replying, "No, she actually thinks I'm working overtime. It's almost too easy." My stomach tightened, but I kept listening. Then Valerie said something that froze me completely. "Don't forget to send me the files from Madison's charity project. The board loved it. I can present it as my idea next week." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They weren't just betraying me as a wife. They were stealing my hard work, something I had built for months to help underprivileged kids through Ethan's company. Ethan's voice followed, proud and careless. Don't worry. Once this is over, she won't be a problem anymore. My hands were shaking as I listened. The pain was deep, but it also gave me a strange sense of power. I finally had everything I needed. Proof of his lies, proof of his cruelty. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I saved the recording carefully and waited. I knew that when the right moment came, his own words would be the weapon that destroyed him. When Ethan told me about his company's anniversary party, I felt a chill run through me. He said it so casually, like nothing had happened. You'll come with me, right? He asked, straightening his tie. I just nodded, pretending to think about it, but inside, my heart twisted. The idea of standing beside him, knowing what I knew, felt unbearable. For days, I debated with myself. Part of me wanted to stay home, to avoid the humiliation I knew was coming. But another part, the stronger one, whispered, go. End this tonight. I had the recording saved, proof of everything. He thought he had full control, but I was the one holding the truth. The night of the party came faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My hands shook as I put on my dress, a deep navy blue one Ethan had always loved. I wanted to look strong, calm, untouchable. I added simple jewelry, took a deep breath, and told myself this would be the last night I'd ever have to pretend. When we arrived at the hotel ballroom, everything sparkled, golden lights, soft music, and people laughing with champagne in hand. Ethan was in his element, shaking hands, smiling, acting like the perfect husband. I stayed by his side, silent, watching. Every time he introduced me to someone, his grip on my back felt fake, like he was putting on a show. Then I saw her, Valerie. She stood near the bar in a red dress, laughing with a group of executives. The moment her eyes met mine, she hesitated, just for a second, before flashing a polite smile. My stomach turned, but I didn't look away. I smiled back. Ethan eventually led me toward the front, saying he needed to make a quick announcement. That's when I realized what was about to happen. I had seen it coming, but now it felt real. He was going to do it here, in front of everyone. He was going to humiliate me. As he took the microphone, I felt my heartbeat in my throat. The room went quiet, and he looked around with confidence. I just want to share something special tonight, he began, glancing at Valerie. This year has been full of changes, and I've found someone who's made me see life differently. People started whispering. My hands clenched around my clutch bag. I could have stopped him right there, but I didn't. I waited. My mind was calm, sharper than ever. I wasn't the broken wife anymore. I was the woman who knew how this night would end. The music faded behind his voice as he spoke, smiling like a man who thought he'd already won. But as I stood there, I realized he had no idea what was coming. Tonight wasn't his victory. It was the night his lies would finally catch up to him. Ethan stood at the center of the ballroom, his smile wide and confident, the kind of smile that used to make me feel safe. Now it only made me sick. He clinked his glass, and the sound echoed through the hall, pulling everyone's attention toward him. I have something important to share, he said proudly. The lights caught his face as he spoke, and I could see how sure he was of himself. He really thought this was his moment. The room fell silent. I could feel dozens of eyes turning toward us, expecting something sweet or romantic. Maybe an anniversary surprise. Maybe a promotion announcement. But deep down, I knew what was coming. I felt it in my chest like a storm about to break. Ethan cleared his throat and said, I've found someone who truly understands me. His words hit like a slap. My fingers tightened around my clutch, but I didn't move. My face stayed calm, even as my heart shattered inside me. The whispers started immediately. People looked at each other, confused, unsure of what he meant. Then he turned toward the crowd, and his smile grew wider. Valerie, he said softly, stretching out his hand toward her. The room gasped. Valerie hesitated for a second, but then stepped forward, her red dress shining under the lights. She tried to act shy, but there was pride in her eyes. Together, they looked like a couple announcing their engagement instead of two people destroying a marriage. I stood there frozen. My breath felt heavy, like the air itself had turned to stone. My heart pounded so hard I thought people might hear it. Around us, people whispered in disbelief. Some looked at me with pity, others tried to look away. It was humiliating, standing there while my husband confessed his affair like it was an achievement. Ethan continued speaking, pretending this was some kind of emotional confession. I know this might come as a surprise, he said, but sometimes life takes us in unexpected directions. I just want to be honest tonight. Honest. That word almost made me laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him if this was the same honesty he used when he lied about working late, when he looked me in the eyes every morning and said he loved me. But I didn't move. I just watched him. Valerie stood beside him, her hand resting on his arm, her smile small but smug. She didn't even glance my way, as if I were invisible, as if I didn't exist. But she had no idea that the quiet woman standing across the room was holding her destruction in her purse. Ethan looked relieved, like a man who had finally dropped his secret. He thought he had won, that I would run away crying, too broken to speak. But he didn't know me anymore. I stayed still, silent, waiting for the right moment. Because this wasn't his night, it was mine. And I was about to take back everything he had stolen. The room was buzzing with whispers, but I couldn't hear a single word clearly. Everything sounded distant, like I was underwater. My whole world had just fallen apart in front of strangers, yet somehow I felt calm. Maybe it was the shock. Or maybe it was the quiet strength that had been building inside me ever since I discovered his lies. Ethan was standing proudly beside Valerie, his arm around her waist, as if I had already been erased from his life. People's faces around the room were a mix of confusion, pity, and discomfort. Some stared at me, waiting for a reaction. Others looked away, pretending not to see the wreckage unfolding. Ethan glanced at me briefly, and for a moment, I saw something like guilt in his eyes, but it disappeared quickly. He thought he had broken me. I took a slow breath and stepped forward. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor, echoing louder than the murmurs around us. Ethan's smile faded just slightly when he realized I was walking toward the microphone. Valerie turned her head, pretending not to be nervous, but her eyes followed every step I took. When I reached the stage, I stood beside Ethan. My hands were shaking, but I gripped the microphone tightly. My voice came out steady, though my heart was pounding. "Wow, Ethan," I said quietly, forcing a small smile. "That's brave. Really brave." The room went completely silent. Even the background music stopped. Ethan frowned, clearly unsure of what I was doing. Valerie shifted uncomfortably beside him. I looked around the room, making sure everyone could hear me. Then I continued. "But before you celebrate this beautiful announcement, maybe everyone should hear what your soulmate really thinks of you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan froze. "Madison, what are you doing?" he asked under his breath, his voice tight. But I ignored him. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. The same phone that held the recording I had kept hidden for days. My thumb hovered over the play button for a moment. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting. Then I pressed play. Valerie's voice filled the room through the speakers. "He's pathetic. Madison's smarter than he'll ever be. I'm just using him to get the promotion." A collective gasp spread through the crowd. People turned toward Valerie, whose face went pale. Ethan's expression changed from arrogance to panic. He tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back. The recording continued, his own laughter, her mocking tone, and their cruel words about me. Each second that passed was another blow to his ego, another truth revealed. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, watching the man who thought he controlled everything lose it all in front of the same people he wanted to impress. When the recording ended, the silence was heavier than before. I handed him the microphone, looked him in the eye, and said softly, "Now everyone knows who you really are." Then I turned around and walked off the stage without looking back. The moment Valerie's voice played through the speakers, the room turned completely silent. Every smile disappeared, every whisper stopped. Her words echoed across the hall, sharp and cruel. "He's pathetic. Madison's smarter than he'll ever be. I'm just using him to get the promotion." You could feel the air shift. People looked at each other in disbelief, their eyes wide. Some covered their mouths. Others just stared at Ethan and Valerie like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Ethan's face went pale. He tried to laugh it off at first, nervously glancing around. "That's not what it sounds like," he stammered. But everyone knew exactly what it sounded like. His voice trembled. Valerie looked frozen, her lips slightly open, her eyes darting toward the back of the room. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was terrified. Then, from one of the front tables, Ethan's boss, Mr. Harris, slowly stood up. He was an older man, calm but strict, known for being fair. His expression was unreadable at first, but then he looked straight at Valerie. "Is this your voice?" he asked. The whole room turned toward her. Valerie's face turned bright red. I can explain," she stuttered, but her voice cracked. Mr. Harris didn't say another word. He just gave her a long, disappointed look before turning to Ethan. And you thought it was a good idea to bring this disaster into my company's celebration? His voice was calm but filled with anger. Ethan tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. He looked lost, completely stripped of the confidence he had a few minutes ago. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then people started murmuring again, soft, sharp whispers cutting through the air. I stood there, watching it all unfold. My heart was pounding, but I didn't feel scared anymore. For the first time in months, I felt powerful. Valerie reached for Ethan's arm, but he pulled away, his face twisted with panic. "Valerie, what the hell did you do?" he whispered harshly. She shook her head, tears starting to form. "You told me no one would ever find out," she said under her breath. The recording kept playing faintly in the background. More laughter, more mockery, until I finally hit stop. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Everyone was watching them now, no longer out of curiosity, but out of disgust. Mr. Harris turned toward me then. His voice softened slightly. "Mrs. Carter, I think you've been through enough tonight. You have my respect." I nodded, my throat tight but my expression steady. Ethan reached out, trying to speak to me, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said quietly. "You've said enough already." As I walked away from the stage, I heard Mr. Harris call for security. Valerie's sobs echoed faintly behind me, and Ethan stood there in complete silence, surrounded by the wreckage of his own choices. For once, the truth had spoken louder than their lies, and everyone had heard it. The chaos that followed was almost unreal. People were whispering, some shaking their heads, others just staring. Valerie was crying, trying to explain herself, but no one wanted to hear her excuses anymore. Mr. Harris called her over, his voice calm but cold. "You're done here," he said firmly. "Pack your things first thing tomorrow. You'll be escorted out." Valerie's face went pale. She tried to plead, saying it was a misunderstanding, but it was useless. Her career was over in minutes. Ethan stood beside her, speechless. His confident smile was long gone. He looked around, searching for someone to take his side, but everyone kept their distance. Even his close colleagues avoided eye contact. The same people who had once admired him now looked disgusted. His reputation, the image he'd built so carefully, was gone in front of his own eyes. Mr. Harris turned to him next. "You were supposed to represent this company with integrity," he said sharply. "Instead, you turned our event into a personal scandal. Don't expect that promotion or any sympathy." Ethan's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. He just stood there, broken, with his head lowered. I watched quietly from a few steps away. It was strange how calm I felt. The woman who had cried alone for weeks was gone. I didn't need to shout or insult him. His downfall spoke louder than anything I could have said. When the crowd began to move again, I walked up to him slowly. He looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. "Madison, please," he whispered, reaching out. But I didn't let him touch me. I opened my clutch and took out a white envelope, the divorce papers I had already signed days ago. I handed them to him without a word. He looked confused at first, then realized what it was. His lips parted, but no sound came out. "You already," he began, but I interrupted softly. "Yes. I knew this day would come." I took a step closer, meeting his eyes for the last time. "You gave me freedom tonight," I whispered, "and I'm not wasting another minute of it." For a second, he just stood there, holding the papers with trembling hands. The room was still watching. No one dared to speak. Valerie sat in the corner, her makeup smudged, staring at the floor. I turned around and started walking toward the exit. Each step felt lighter than the last. I didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear the faint sound of Ethan calling my name, but it didn't matter anymore. The pain, the lies, the humiliation, it all ended right there. When I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face. I breathed deeply, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, peace. For the first time, I wasn't the broken wife. I was free. And as the doors closed behind me, I knew I had finally taken my life back. Weeks passed after that night, and everything in my life began to change. The house that once felt heavy with silence and lies was now empty, but it was peaceful. I moved into a smaller place on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every morning, sunlight came through the windows, and I could breathe without feeling trapped. For the first time in years, I woke up without fear of what mood Ethan would be in or what lie I might hear next. I started focusing on myself again. I went back to working on my charity project, this time under my own name. The same project Ethan and Valerie had tried to take credit for was now my new beginning. People reached out to support me, and the community grew stronger. Slowly, I found pieces of myself that I had lost during my marriage: my laughter, my confidence, my calm. Ethan tried to contact me several times. He called, texted, even showed up outside my new apartment once, looking like a shadow of the man he used to be. The arrogance in his eyes was gone. Now there was only regret. He said he had lost everything: his job, his reputation, and even Valerie, who had disappeared the same week she was fired. When I opened the door that day and saw him standing there, I didn't feel anger anymore, just a quiet sense of closure. He begged me to talk, said he'd made a terrible mistake, that he wanted to make things right. But there was nothing left to fix. He had broken something that couldn't be repaired: trust. I looked at him and said calmly, "I wish you well, Ethan, but we're done. You taught me what I never want again." Then I closed the door gently, leaving him standing there in silence. That night, I sat by my window, sipping tea, thinking about how everything had come full circle. There was no need for revenge anymore. Life had already taken care of it. Ethan's downfall wasn't just public, it was personal. He had to face the truth about who he had become, and that was punishment enough. I smiled softly to myself, realizing how strange karma could be. Sometimes it doesn't take years or decades to come around. Sometimes it happens right in front of everyone, when the mask finally falls and the truth stands on its own. That night at the party, karma didn't just knock quietly. It showed up under the bright lights, with the whole world watching. Now my life is quiet, simple, and peaceful. I don't need big crowds or fake smiles anymore. I have my freedom, my work, and my peace, things no one can take from me again. Ethan became a lesson, not a memory I hate. And every time I think back to that night, I don't feel pain. I feel grateful. Because that was the night karma showed up, right on time.